Is your anxiety stopping you from going on dates, getting your dream job, or speaking up for yourself? If it is, you're in the right place, because in this video today, we're going to talk about how to stop your anxiety before it stops you. We've all experienced anxiety in our lives, and in some cases, it's a lot more dangerous than in other cases. But it's really important in either case to manage your anxiety because it can make you miss out on opportunities, it could cause you to make bad decisions for yourself, and it can make you feel like you're watching your life go by without actually living it. But what is anxiety? By definition, anxiety is defined as a feeling of worry, nervousness, or unease, typically about an imminent event or something with an uncertain outcome. Our brain is made up of four major parts that we call the cerebral cortex. One of those major parts is called the temporal lobe. Anxiety is generated by a piece in our temporal lobe called the amygdala. Now, the amygdala is responsible for processing fear and emotions, and it's located right about here in our brain. What's more important than understanding where in the brain our anxiety comes from is understanding that our brain makes us feel anxious for a reason. In the past, when we were back in the cave era, our brain would make us feel anxious in order to help us survive and avoid getting hurt by certain people, groups, animals, and foods. And this was used as a survival instinct. So the good news is it's a natural system in your brain, and your brain is designed to sometimes make you feel anxious. The bad news is we've evolved far beyond primitive stages, but our brain still has these functions. This means that our brain is using the same system and sending the same signals that it was all those years ago when we were, say, standing in front of a dinosaur, as it is when we are going to a family event or a social event. And although sometimes maybe a family holiday can feel like you're walking through the jungle with the dinosaurs, it's not the same threat. It's not the same thing. And even though we're not typically in survival situations day to day, our brain can basically misinterpret things that are going on in our life as life or death situations, causing us to feel anxious. We experience varying levels of anxiety based on the perceived threat that our brain is attempting to process. The reason that this is dangerous beyond just missing opportunities, not being able to go on a date, not being able to go after the job that you want, is because these systems in our brain were designed for short-term use. They were designed for running from a dinosaur once in a blue moon. They were not designed to be on 24/7. If you struggle with anxiety, if you've had trauma in your past, if you have PTSD or CPTSD, these systems are on all the time. And because they're designed for infrequent short-term use, what we're at risk of doing if we don't manage anxiety is doing damage to other systems in our body, which is why it's common for people with trauma and PTSD to also experience chronic pain or gut issues. So although that's a basic example, I wanted to give you a little bit of background on why it's actually very important to manage your anxiety. It's beyond just being able to go to the social event. It's beyond just being able to go on the date with the person that you like. It's beyond all of those things. Tip number one is to build awareness around your anxiety and the things that make you anxious. Now, this is tip number one for a reason. It's foundational to understanding the rest of what we talk about in this video. We have a saying here, you can't solve a problem if you don't know it exists. And that's what awareness is all about, figuring out where the problems are, why the problems are. Because if we don't know where they are or why they are or when they're happening, it's going to be really hard to fix them. Now, there's a bunch of ways you can help build awareness around your anxiety and the things that make you anxious. The way I like to recommend is to keep a journal. Now, you can do this in the notes on your phone, or you can literally do it in a journal. But ask yourself some questions, and I'm going to give you some examples here. When am I likely to feel anxious? What makes me feel anxious? Do I feel anxious right now? Why do I feel anxious? Who makes me anxious? What sorts of situations make me anxious? Where do I think my anxiety comes from? How am I acting before I begin to feel anxious? How am I acting once I start to feel anxious? Are there things that make my anxiety worse? Are there things that make my anxiety better? Now, these are just some examples, but they're going to give you a jumping off point to build some awareness around your anxiety, so then we can move on to the next step. Now, tip number two is to have tools and strategies to manage and cope with your anxiety. Now, this tip is useless without the next tip, so make sure you stick around for that. There's a ton of amazing anxiety relief tools out there, and it's important that you understand them, that you know them, and you, what I call, have them in your toolbox. You need them in your pocket so that when you're anxious, and this will come into play in the next tip, you can actually use them. Now, if you don't have tools and strategies already to manage your anxiety, I recently released a book called The Art of Trauma Relief. I teach 9 amazing relief tools in that book, and you can get it for free with the link in the description below. Learning and implementing those tools are going to change your life dramatically, and I'm going to do future videos teaching those tools. But like I said, all of those tools are useless without tip number 3. And tip number 3 is to plan and rehearse. Maybe the most important thing we talk about in this video today. Now you know when and why you feel anxious. Now you know the tools to use to help calm the anxiety. Now what you need to do is plan for when you're going to use these tools and how you're going to use these tools, and most importantly, rehearse these tools. What that means is practice, okay? You don't get up in front of a sold-out Wembley Stadium crowd, the biggest stadium in the world, and give a speech without practicing it. We need to practice in order to master these tools. So what I want you to do is practice your anxiety relief tools when you don't need them. Sounds kind of weird, right? I want you to practice them when you don't need them, when you don't feel anxious, so that what you're doing is you're building muscle memory. So when the time comes, when it's show time, you're gonna be able to pull that tool out of your pocket, out of your toolbox, and you're going to know it cold, and you're gonna be able to do it at the push of a button. Now that is essential. That's the part that most people miss when they work with anxiety relief tools. You need to be able to do them in the moments, in the times where you're anxious, which means you also have to have a good roster of tools. You need a tool that you can use discreetly, a tool that you can use at work, at school, when driving. You need a whole collection of tools, which is why I call it a toolbox, so that you can use them when you need them and get that anxiety either down to a manageable level, or there's going to be tools that melt that anxiety away. And tip number 4, the most important tip for the long term, is to solve the root cause. All anxiety has a root cause. There's a reason why we feel anxious. What we want to do long term is identify what that reason is, and then we want to do something we call processing. We want to process that root cause. When we can process the root cause of our anxiety or our depression or anything else that we're facing, it's going to eliminate the effects. So there's a cause and there's an effect. Anxiety is the effect of some sort of cause. Now, there may be many root causes. It could be one, it could be many. Identify that root cause, heal that root cause, doing some processing. And on this channel, you're gonna learn a lot of processing tools. You're gonna learn more about how that works in the brain and what systems our brain uses to actually process information. But once you heal the root cause, you're free and clear. And then everything else that we talked about in this video actually doesn't matter. Because if you heal the root, you'll no longer experience anxiety. And that is a beautiful world to live in. If you like this video today, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell, because in future videos, I'm gonna be teaching you the tools in this book so you can put them into action immediately and get relief from your anxiety, depression, nightmares, flashbacks, and all sorts of other things. And if you like today's video, you're gonna love that video, so make sure you click right now and check it out.